collar up Cantona. Now Eric Cantona was the king in his prime. In the mid-90s, the Premier League was ruled by this charismatic Frenchman, and throughout some of his best games he would play an entire 90 minutes with his shirt collar up. Now first of all, this would be extremely uncomfortable. Like, I would not want to play an entire 90-minute game with my shirt collar up. Like, even if my shirt collar was up for more than 2 seconds back in like school days when I used to wear a shirt because now I'm a chud and I only wear pajamas, I would get annoyed. It would just be uncomfortable. It would like touch my skin and stuff. But this guy was able to play for a full 90 minutes with the collar up. You know, he was representing himself on a football pitch, not just by his skills on the ball, but also his appearance. And like each and every time he put that collar up in a 90-minute game, he would turn into a different beast. And throughout some of his best periods in a Man United kit, he had that collar up. And after making this move from Leeds to Manchester United, he would win 4 Premier League titles in 5 seasons with the Red Devils, cementing his name as a leader in this Manchester United dynasty. And honestly, he was one of the figureheads at the top of this Manchester United dressing room during this period in their time. They were about to get into that new gen with the likes of Gary Neville, you know, David Beckham, and Cantona was leading the way as, you know, the head honcho, delivering for Manchester United fans when it mattered. From his chip against Sunderland back in December of 1996 to him kung fu kicking a fan, Eric Cantona really showed that his final form wasn't just a representation of his stats, but also who he was. And I think whilst we're talking about a Manchester United legend, there's others that also kind of stem out from this, like greasy mullet Ronaldo with the tape on his socks. This was Cristiano Ronaldo's first, you know, Super Saiyan season. This was when this young Portuguese winger was evolving from just this trickster into a goal scorer and a guy that could just penetrate a defense single-handedly. And in the 2007/8 season, he entered the new campaign with, you know, this slick, greasy hair, but also tape around his ankles. This was version 1.0 of his final form. 23 years old, he was stepping out with mercurial vapors. And that season he was simply unstoppable, known as the strongest by many in the league, scoring 42 goals in 49 games for Manchester United, whilst also driving Manchester United to a Champions League and Premier League double. Like, I can make an entirely separate video about this version of Ronaldo itself because it was that good. To the point where there was no debate who the best player in the Premier League was. It was simply Ronaldo. And I think what made him so good during this time is that he gained this ability to just make things happen by himself, picking up the ball in unfamiliar territories on a pitch where he wouldn't really get it, and he would just start running at a defense like his life was on the line. It seemed as if at times there was no tactics to his play. It was just get the ball, turn around, run at this defense and score a goal. And there were multiple successful occasions where he was able to do so. And then you look at his partners in crime up top, and they also had their own final forms. The likes of skinhead Rooney that we saw, you know, kind of during the 2000s, but eventually when Ronaldo had left the club in the 2009/10 season, skinhead Rooney would really come to prevail, because once Ronaldo and his power had left the door, this opened, you know, a new gate of opportunity for Rooney to become the man that everyone knew he already was. He was this bull of a striker that went through this notable physical transformation, going from big to even bigger. Adopting this skinhead look, he was on no nonsense. You know, it did not matter. He was going to war every single game, I swear. This guy must have been wearing AirPods on the pitch. You know, he was listening to drill during games. There is no reason to come out lining up like this. Like, what's going on? He ain't got no clue about football no more. He just wants to break legs. However, he did. He was one of the best players in the Premier League during this time. And during the 2009/10 season, skinhead Rooney would score 34 goals in all comps, whilst also being voted PFA Player of the Year. And of course they voted for him, because if they didn't, he would headbutt their door open and tell them, why are you not voting for me? Arguably this season was his finest season, and that's just my opinion, but it was also one of the most enjoyable to watch. Like, he would go and slide tackle a defender, get the ball, pick it up, start driving, maybe do a little bit of creative play, but also get on the end of a chance. Like, this version of Rooney just defined his raw, power on a football pitch. And he was showing out in 2010 too, scoring 2 goals against AC Milan if I remember correctly. Now, of course, Manchester United have a bunch of players that kind of went through final forms themselves, but this next player is magical. Now, in my opinion, no sponsor Ronaldinho is the final form of Ronaldinho, because in the early to mid 2000s, after making a move to Barcelona, Ronaldinho would see himself donning a kit that had no sponsor on it. And during this period in his career where he would wear this baggy kit where the sleeves went down to his fingertips, he would play some of the best football the world has ever seen. No sponsor Ronaldinho is arguably one of the best final forms in football history, because during this stretch of time in Ronaldinho's career, he was like a sorcerer on the pitch. Arriving at Barcelona in 2003, they were not in the best of times, going through some sort of slump in the club's history. Finishing 6th in La Liga prior to his arrival, he would boost them in all aspects, transforming them into champions and also rekindling the spirit of the Camp Nou. And I think the aesthetic of this era was just unforgettable, tied in to what Ronaldinho was looking like on a football pitch. From 2003 to 2006, Barcelona had no sponsor on their top, and during these years we saw the golden era and golden years of Ronaldinho. From 2004 to 2006, Ronaldinho would win back-to-back FIFA World Player of the Year, and in 2005 he would also win the Ballon d'Or, confirming what everyone already knew just by the eye test. And in that 2005/06 season, he was at the peak of his powers, donning nothing on his chest. No sponsors, getting 26 goals and 24 assists while also helping Barcelona win a Champions League and La Liga. And it's not even these accolades that made this version of himself so good. It was the way in which he, played on a football pitch, a grin whilst taking on defenders. In his debut, he would score a banger. Against Real Madrid in El Clasico, I remember when he was skinning up Ramos, scoring solo run finishes running from nearly the halfway line. Time and time again, when you look back at Ronaldinho's career, especially during this point in time, it's just up there, a peak. He could leave defenders frozen with just a swivel of the hips going one way and then the other. He also made the art of a flip-flap, a skill in which he perfected, to say the least. You also got to think about the culture back then and what ties into this final form, him being, the first, I think, million viewed video on YouTube with a commercial for Nike where he got these new boots, he's hitting the ball against the crossbar. It's just amazing. And that's why, in my opinion, this version of Ronaldinho, nothing comes close in terms of impact on, off the pitch, in terms of what it did for future footballers. This is the pinnacle. And then you also add into the fact that he was mentoring a young Lionel Messi before he eventually left the club. Like master passing on his powers to the disciple, Gojo, Satoru, Jujutsu Kaisen, giving the keys to Yuta Okkotsu before ultimately being sealed.
This is what was going on.
Another final form that we have to talk about is World Cup trim R9. Now, this was Ronaldo's redemption. R9 coming back from injury and just taking over a tournament, helping Brazil to do it all. Back in 2002, ahead of the World Cup, Ronaldo would, for some reason, cut his hair in the most bizarre way, giving himself a purposely botched haircut that he just wanted to rock throughout the tournament. And my oh my, would this pay off, because ultimately this would become his final form. Not only would this trim become iconic in football history, but also just streets history, with kids getting this to this day. But also, Ronaldo would go on to lead Brazil throughout the tournament, being their top goal scorer, scoring in the decisive moments, the likes of Germany, Ghana, and ultimately he would lift a trophy that nobody sought him to do. He was written off, a season prior with an injury that he got during his club career. But after months of rehabilitation, he was able to make adjustments and made it to the World Cup. It was a miracle at that, but this made it even more special. Essentially, what this haircut did was distract everyone from the fact that this guy was still carrying some sort of injury lingering. And during the 2002 World Cup, he would score a record 8 goals throughout the tournament. And prior to this World Cup, R9 had been the world's best striker during the late 90s, but suffered horrific knee injuries that sidelined him. For almost the entirety of 2000 and 2001, this guy was just completely nowhere to be seen, with many doubting that he would ever be the same, yet he prevailed. The 2002 World Cup hosted in Korea and Japan was his redemption arc, a time where a person would reflect on their past before coming into a new light and changing something about themselves. He redeemed himself throughout this tournament. He played like a man on a mission, scoring in Brazil's opener against Turkey with, an iconic toe poke finish. And by the final against Germany, he had collected 6 goals while scoring 2 in the final against Germany, which were both beautiful finishes. The image of Ronaldo during that tournament, the buck tooth and the haircut are so symbolic with what that tournament became for him. And in my opinion, that was his final form and peak. And another hair related final form is red hair Freddie Ljungberg. This might not be well known to a lot of you guys, but Freddie Ljungberg was, an Arsenal super sub before the likes of, Martinelli or a Trossard. And in spring of 2002, this super sub would take the next step, making his hair completely red. And this change somehow coincided with a change in form, a final form, helping Arsenal this season to a league title and FA Cup double. And he would actually score 7 goals in the final 8 games of the season. We could also talk about the likes of Gucci headband, Alan Saint-Maximin. This was the final form of a player that we didn't even know had this sort of potential, because when he put on that Gucci headband, not only did he get banned, or I think he got, he wasn't allowed to use the headband, but he just turned into a different beast. It's like he was playing street football but in the game. Like when Saint-Maximin was wearing this headband, he was just embodying a free spirit on the pitch. Every time he got the ball, in St. James's Park, fans would just get on their feet. They were cheering him on. It didn't even matter if he got 0 goals, 0 assists. He just needed a good touch, take on a player, get past him and pass it off. But there were times where he was doing his thing, and lately, he's actually doing his thing in football right now. That's why I just kind of wanted to mention him. Now, there are many different types of player examples when it comes to explaining a final form in football, from the likes of, a taped hand Benzema or a masked Victor Osimhen. But what I wanted to really establish in this video is a discussion about, these sorts of final forms that we have in our heads. This whole video is kind of like headcanon, because no one has ever called 2007/8 Ronaldo greasy hair mullet Ronaldo. But in terms of headcanon and things that I think in my brain when I watch football, I create like save files about different players, like Samir Nasri with the snood for Arsenal. That's like a segment of a player's career that is highlighted in my head. Of course, you guys just let me know what you think of this whole idea in the comments below, and if there's any examples that you have that are completely different to mine and not so popular. Of course, leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and that will indicate if you want me to kind of elaborate more on this topic. Comment what you thought, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. If you want to support the channel even more, you can become a channel member. And of course, this has been me, Jib Rules, back with another video. Stay safe, stay blessed, and peace.